Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Hello, 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 and welcome once again to Healing Moments. It's a new month and a new topic. This month, we're talking about interpersonal relationships, and we're going to start with communication. Communication is a noun, and one of the definitions is the successful conveying of or sharing ideas and feelings. As per usual, this evening, we are going to be spiritually, mentally, and physically fed. But before we go any further, let's have a word of prayer and go to the spiritual aspect of the program from Pastor Lucas.
Let us pray, everybody. Our Father in heaven, we give you thanks, we give you praise for the privilege to be here another evening. Be with us, Lord, as we share and discuss matters that relate to our topic, communication in relationships. We thank you, Lord, for those who logged on and those who will log on, and may this program be a blessing to them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Yes, so this evening, good evening to everybody. We're glad to be back with you this evening. As we begin the new theme for this month. Here's a devotional I want to share with you. It's based on Proverbs 15 and verse 1. It says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. An old anecdote tells us about a little boy who discovered a rock formation while exploring the area around his village. He shouted to the rocks, "Hello, hello." Immediately the answer came, "Hello, hello." Not knowing that it was an echo, he started uttering unpleasant words to which he heard just the same ugly answers. Back home, he told his mother that a new boy had come into their neighborhood and that he definitely must be a bad boy since he was saying swear words. Guessing what might have happened, the mother urged him to go back and to utter kind, loving words to this kid to see what would happen. Soon, the little one confirmed that the stranger's words were as sweet as his. Sometimes, we find ourselves having unfriendly or angry feelings toward a close or not so close person. In response, we believe or even say that this person should have been more pleasant and should not have been so rude or reacted so violently. However, it is even better to practice what today's message recommends. A soft answer turns away wrath. The sentence implies that angry behavior is already there and that our soft reply could calm the fury. Verbal expression with its tone and content is very important. The Bible points to it in various occasions. For example, it tells us that death and life are in the power of the tongue, Proverbs 18:21. The Apostle James presents the tongue as a dangerous organ, a tiny body part that boasts great things and that is capable of setting a large forest on fire, James 3:5. The tongue is also a world of iniquity, verse 6. The apostle offers us the remedy to control our words. The same apostle ends the chapter by recommending the wisdom that is from above, a wisdom that, according to his explanation, is pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy, verse 17. With this wisdom, our utterances will not light fires, but instead will put them out and will end up communicating peace, verse 18. Words are very dangerous weapons that are capable of bringing good or bringing evil. Remember the story of the little boy who responded to the echo of his words. Let us use our words to calm anger and bring peace to the hearts of those who hear them. Something to think about. The echo of my words. Communication.
Remember, you have your part to play in this program as well. You have the opportunity to weigh in on each segment this evening. Make your notes and get all your questions ready, because after the health segment, you are going to be able to type your questions either in the question box or in the Q&A box. But before all of that, let's get the mental aspect from Sister Sherry Sobers.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and good evening, everyone. I'm excited. We are about to go into a topic that is really, really interesting. It has so many different parts, and I'll be honest with you, we may not be able to cover all the parts in the next 4 weeks. However, as you look at the issues that relate to you and you want to ask the questions, we are here. We encourage you to ask the questions. So, interpersonal relationships. It's a popular phrase used in human resource management, helping employers and employees to relate effectively. But it also has a place in so many different genres of life, in the home, in the church, in the school, in the family, in every human interaction. Because as the phrase says, it relates to how we relate as people. And in every sphere we relate. When you go to the supermarket, you relate to the checkout person. When you go to the bank, you relate to the teller. We are constantly communicating and relating. So I have a definition for you. Now, it is a short definition. It can also be a very long definition. I want to give you the lengthy one because I want you to see how broad range this topic is. So interpersonal relationships are dynamic systems between two or more persons that change continuously during their existence. You hear that word, dynamic, constantly changing. They may be short-lived depending on the type of relationship, or they may be long-lasting, having a beginning, a lifespan, and an end. They are close relationships, most often found with family or circle of best friends, a close circle of friends. And if nurtured and maintained correctly, they can give you the most joy and the most satisfaction. But you know there's a flip side to that, but we won't be discussing that. Now, this association may be based on love, solidarity, regular business interactions, or some other kind of social commitment that may relate to between people. Interpersonal relationships are formed in the context of the social, the cultural, and other influences. The context, as I said, can vary from family to friends to marriage, and it goes on and on and on. What I really want you to get is that when you are in a healthy relationship, you experience happiness, and it is shown that the relationship is priority. They grow and they improve gradually. But sometimes when we are not in a close connection, our relationships may deteriorate. Now, there are varying types of interpersonal relationships. You may have the individual working together with an organization. You may have people working within a certain team. Students would have teams and groups that they work together. There may be that love relationship between a man and a woman. There may be the relationship between immediate family members and relatives, that relationship with a child and its parents, between friends, and there are also relationships between groups or nations. Imagine that even nations, even countries can have relationships. So they develop in a group, they develop as individuals, they develop as a country. And there are some important things that relationships must have, interpersonal relationships must have. Now, you must share common goals, common objectives. Individuals must also have respect for each other. You must be attached to each other either in a healthy interpersonal relationship or with a business or whatever. There must be transparency, open, honest communication. And that's where we come in today as one of the factors to maintain a healthy interpersonal relationship: communication. Now, as I said before, it's a broad topic. It has many tentacles, many arms, and over the next 4 weeks, we're going to go through what we consider the critical areas. The one area we're going to talk about today is what is the best way to communicate effectively. Now, how do we know whether we have communicated a point effectively? When the message sent by the speaker, when the same message sent by the speaker is received in the way it is intended. Now, have you ever played past the message? And you know how that goes. From the original person to the end. Most of the time, we never get the correct ending message. However, that's just one way of looking at communication. And sometimes there can be other factors that relate to why the message passed from the beginning did not end. So, as I close, here are some important points to remember when we look at communication. Number one, it is said to be the basis for every interpersonal relationship. Can't get away from communicating. It plays a role in reducing misunderstandings and eventually strengthens the bonds among individuals. A relationship may lose its charm if individuals do not express and reciprocate their feelings through the various modes of communication. When you're communicating, use words. Not all the time we have to use words, but when you are using your words, be polite. Watch your tone and your choice of words. An individual must interact with the other person regularly for the relationship to grow and to reach to the next level. Listen to understand the other person's point of view and not just to respond. And that is really, really critical. Sometimes we are so caught up in what we want to reply to the person that we have not heard the person. Individuals can also communicate through emails, but sometimes the essence of the message really gets lost in the black and white. And that's where sometimes we need the one-on-one, face-to-face. And in the world that we are in right now, we know we do everything via text, via email, but the reality is that there are some messages that only get their true essence with the one-on-one. And finally, feelings can be expressed through non-verbal modes of communication as well. Your body movements, your gestures, your facial expressions, your hand movements. All of those things communicate something or another. So you know I like to leave my quote at the end. So as I wrap up this section on communication, I want you to think about this. I may have said a lot. I may have said things that you may not remember. But this I want you to remember. According to Peter Drucker, he says, the most important thing in communication is hearing what is not said. Hear what I said? The most important thing in communication is hearing what is not said. Thank you again, and I look forward to your questions, your comments as we wrap up this section. Have a good evening.
Ken?
I'll be back. Turn on your camera, that's what you need to do. Turn on your camera.
Okay, wait on.
Right. Stand by 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
Thank you and welcome back. Now, we are going into a health aspect of this program. But as always, I want to remind you that you have your chance after Dr. Dupree to speak. So here we go. Let's listen to the health aspect, Dr. Dupree.
Hello, everyone. I usually get introduced with more music, so I'm not sure what has become of my music. I'm really sorry that some of you joined at 12 minutes after 6 and even 6:15 because you missed most of it already. But I'm going to share my screen now because I'm going to talk about some other relationships that occur on a different level. Let me share my screen. Sorry, I am screen sharing. Right, so I'm happy that Sister Sherry was talking about relationships between families, child and father, relationship between countries. And she was saying that it's dynamic. It keeps going on and it continually changes. So I'm going to talk about relationships that are going on inside of our bodies. And I don't know if I should call it intrapersonal relationships, but that's what I'm choosing to call it at the moment. So if I ask a child or some of you without much biology knowledge to draw a cell, you will draw something like that, or probably it's going to look like a circle, and you will label the nucleus and the cytoplasm, and you may remember that there is a cell membrane as well. And if you have a little more knowledge, then you might put in those little pink things that are called mitochondria. They are the biggest of the particle inside the cell. And if you have more biology knowledge, you will probably draw it like this. Flat, circular, you will put a nucleolus. In the nucleus, you will be aware that there is a nuclear envelope separating the nucleus from the rest of the cytoplasm. You will put in the Golgi apparatus, endoplasmic reticulum, the mitochondria, the ribosomes, etc. And you may even go further and draw it as a three-dimensional structure, because that's what it actually is. No cell is going to be flat, two-dimensional as we draw them, but they're actually three-dimensional, what shall we call them, units in the body. They have a cell membrane. I'm trying to use my pointer, not right. So there is a cell membrane around the cell, and there is a cytoplasm with lots of stuff going on inside the cell. And the nucleus, and inside of, and the nucleus is also three-dimensional, not a circle, but something more like a sphere, although it can look irregular sometimes. And then there is a nucleolus inside. And if you're more aware, then you may draw it something like this, because you will remember that the cell membrane is not just a one-line membrane or one layer membrane, but that the cell membrane is actually a bilayer, a lipid bilayer, with the lipid molecules on the outside, and you can actually end up splitting this layer into two because it is a bilayer. So it has water-loving molecules on the inside and not molecules, yes, water-loving molecules on the inside and water-hating or water-repelling molecules on the outside. So for more detail on this, is just part of the cell membrane, and you can actually tear it apart like this and expose the water-loving end. And lo and behold, there are other things sticking out on the outside of the cell membrane. So you have receptors. Some of them are like channels, membrane channel receptors that allow materials to go in and out. You have extra membrane receptors or outer membrane receptors. You have receptors on the inner membrane, and you have those that go transmembrane. And materials can stick to the outside, cause changes on the inside, and send messages to the inside of the cell. So these are ways that we sometimes communicate if we're talking about friend to friend or person to person. Sometimes we talk to ourselves. I'm not sure what level of communication that is, Sister Sherry, or if that is healthy, but we talk to ourselves sometimes, and sometimes we may whisper to a friend. We may shout to someone that's across the hall. We may lecture to an audience or preach to a congregation. We may phone a loved one, or we may send texts or email. We're trying to send messages. Do cells talk to each other? Do cells message each other? How do they do that? We know of a process called signaling. So cells can talk to themselves. They can talk to other cells nearby. They can talk to cells that are far away. And they do that by a process that we call signaling. And when I get to the end, I will let you know what that has to do with you, because all of this is going on inside of you. You can't pretend that you don't care about it. So there's autocrine signaling. Auto means self. Autocrine signaling is a form of signaling in which the cell secretes some chemicals, some hormones, called the autocrine agents, and that binds to receptors on the same cell and gives the cell messages to change what's going on in the internal environment of the cell. So this is a cell talking to itself, giving off chemical messengers that are going to bind to receptors on the same cell. Most of the time when that happens, it leads the cell to start cell division. So that's autocrine signaling. And that's what it looks like. The cell gives off those little droplets of chemicals, those little molecules. They're picked up by the receptors on the same cell and cause the cell to undergo changes. Then you have talking to their neighbors, like talking to your neighbor over the fence, somebody who is in close contact. So other cells in close contact undergo juxtaprint signaling. Juxta meaning nearby. In juxtaprint interactions, proteins from the cell interact with receptors on adjacent cells. Sometimes they're very, very, very close by. And sometimes we call that direct signaling, because the chemical passes from one cell and enters, attaches to the receptor on the next cell and causes cells nearby to change. So in organs like the liver, for example, when liver cells are damaged, some cells cause nearby cells to start regenerating. So they're talking to their neighbor. And that's what juxtaprint signaling looks like. You have membrane-bound signal molecule giving off chemicals, attaching to a cell nearby, or like that, where the receptors actually touch and the exchange processes. You've seen that before. I should put up the diagram again in nerve cells, where an electrical signal is transmitted through one cell, and the cell is not touching the other nerve cell, but there is a gap, and chemicals can cross that gap. So that's sort of like juxtaprint signaling. And you may wonder what that has to do with you. What does that have to do with you? If you want to know what that has to do with you and how you can change what's going on, even though next week we may be doing a different aspect of communication, I'd like to continue with that type of cell-to-cell communication and tell you what you can do in order to make sure that your cells keep talking to each other. Because if the cells stop talking to each other, you have a breakdown of the entire system. As a matter of fact, cancers are cells that have gone rogue. One of my lecturers used to say, the cells that have gone Jamaican, they've stopped behaving themselves. And one of the ways in which they're affected is that they stop talking to each other, and they're not listening to each other, and they're doing their own thing. So when you come back next week, we will talk about more of the cell talk and what you can do to ensure that your cells keep talking to each other. So will you be back next week? I hope so.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dupree, for that health message. Now it's time for you, the attendees, to get in on the action and for you to answer your questions. And we have a question. And this question goes, if the most important thing in communication is hearing what is not said, please give us some ideas as to how we can hear what is not said. Sister Sherry, I think this one is for you.
Yes. Kathy, I'm not sure if you can see my video, my camera.
No, not as yet.
But you can hear my lovely voice, so I will communicate that way.
Yes.
So the question is, if the most important thing is hearing what is not said, some ideas. I can think of two off the top. So for example, if you are not sure of what the person is saying, what you can do is ask the person to repeat, or you rephrase it how you thought you heard what you said. Because the thing with communication is that you have to understand that the message that the sender sends may not be the message that is picked up. So it's very important that we also, if the person is in front of you, look at the nonverbal cues. So for example, we often ask the question, how are you doing? But we just ask it casually. And the person might say, I'm doing okay. But then you can look at their face and you can look at their disposition and you can see that they're not really okay. They may not be at a place where they can respond to you appropriately, but so therefore you can ask also, this may not be a good time. Do you want to talk about it later? So it is all about checking the nonverbal cues that the person is given. If the person is in front of you, if the person is not in front of you, it is via text, because I know we do a lot of communicating via text. And that's why I said earlier that sometimes the message is lost in the transition and is lost in translation. So therefore, it means just digging deeper, just going deeper. And more importantly, listening to what is being said. One thing about communication is that you will realize it is about talking, but even more importantly, it is about listening. So when somebody is saying something, you give them your 100% attention. Nowadays, we are so often busy by doing this, that, the next, and the third, that we ask somebody a question, but we are just thinking about what I have to do next. No, ask the question or listen to the person. And then when you hear what they are saying, but you're not sure, you repeat what you thought you heard. And if it is what you heard, communication has taken place. If something needs to be rephrased, if they need to reframe what they've said, then you can do just that. But one important aspect of communication is listening, not just for your response, but listening to hear what the person is saying and what the person is not saying.
Yeah, I asked a question behind the scenes, and you answered, and they said, let's leave it until we get in front of everyone in the panelists. I don't remember the question, but you did. So if you can repeat that question for me and then answer it, I'll be happy.
Kathy, I did not quite understand what you said.
Okay, remember we were speaking behind the scenes and you were answering this question. And I asked you what happens if...
oh, yes.
What happens if that person cannot show you how they're feeling or express it?
Sometimes you have to leave it to another time. It may not be the right time. It may not be the right place. It may not be the right context. If it is a situation between an adult and a child, and you would want that child to express whatever is going on, and the child likes to draw, for example, you can ask the child to draw. You're not looking for perfect artistic ability. You're looking for communication, because again, communication is, yes, it is about words, but it is about getting the message across. You can ask them to play a song that speaks to them at that point in time. So once you understand the message that the sender wants, however whether it is verbally or non-verbally, whether it is a song, whether it's through art, whether it is through movement, body language, the important thing is that communication would have taken place.
I don't know, Pastor Lucas, you want to weigh in on this one?
Yes, it's an important question. How to hear what is not said.
Yes.
One needs to have a fairly broad mind. When I say a fairly broad mind, to know that when something is being said, you know that something is missing from this. You know something's missing. It's like, let me just use this, because this is what I learned when I was teaching. Sometimes there's a situation where there's a student who is not well behaved, troublesome person. But they would have left school and they've come back for a testimonial. And you write a testimonial, which is very factual. Attendance at school and those kind of things. But then the other things that people want to hear about are not there.
Mm-hmm.
Like behavior. You don't see anything about behavior. Now, a person who understands certain things would say, wait, how come they said nothing about behavior? So you know that is missing. But you need to have a fairly wide view of things to recognize when there is something that is missing from here. What is there is true, but there are some things that are missing. So having a fairly wide experience, wide view of things, which takes in, I guess, a number of things, reading and informing yourself. You can know what is missing in most cases. Then there are other people who do not know what's missing, because, the mind does not go that far. So that's an important part, I think, in being able to pick up what was not said. That is very important. So that, as Shari said, when there's something going on, you need to listen for what is not being said, which will require certain skills from you or certain abilities from you. If those skills are not there, I'm sorry, you will not know what is not said. You'll be quite happy with all that has been said.
That is so true, Pastor. It is very important what you said about having those skills, because they come through practice. through intentional practice. Not everyone naturally possesses those skills to hear what's not being said or to listen. Sometimes our brains, some persons' brains are just constantly working and always 3-4 steps ahead, but they're not present. So one other thing I would add too is that you must be present in the situation. It can still be via text, it can still be via an email, it can still be face to face, but it is being present and being part of the communication process.
I want to ask another question. I want to ask another question based on what you both said. But first, I want to hear what Dr. Dupree has to say on the health part of this question.
How do you hear what is not being said?
Yeah, and
Okay.
how does it affect you health-wise?
Yes. It comes down to knowing your body, because not only do your cells talk to each other, but in the end, your entire body speaks to you. And there are times when you're going to feel pain, and pain may be the body's way of communicating that something is not right. But sometimes there may be nothing that's present, like pain or fever. It may be something that's absent, like the will to get up and go. It may be a lack of motivation to do your work. It may be a part of your body that has stopped working, stopped functioning. So in that way, it's important to listen to what your body is not saying. If it's not telling you to get up and go, and I mean go in every sense of the word, then it means that something is missing, something is not being said, and you have to listen. So it's not always going to be a signal like pain or fever. It may be that something is not moving. So yes, there are similarities in health as well.
Okay, I wanted to hear what Dr. Dupree had to say about that before I ask this question to Sister Sobers and Pastor Lucas. For most of you who know me from Good News Church, y'all would see me smiling and stuff like that. But what if one Sabbath I came to church and I came to church with the same attitude, but there's something going on with me that I need to say, but I don't know how to say, I don't know how to communicate it in words, and I'm trying to hide my actions.
How would we?
How would you know?
Depends on how well we know you.
Exactly.
I'm sure the person who knows you well will probably pick up that cue. Because I remember once I presented at a health nugget at Zoom, and right after that, I got 2 text messages. You're not feeling well? And I didn't say I wasn't feeling well. I just presented my talk. But 2 people picked up that I wasn't doing very well that day. And they messaged me right away because these 2 people know me very well. So it's about getting to know each other as well. There's going to be somebody that will pick it up. It may be Carol, it may not be me, it may be Pastor.
That's correct. There are things that our body, we can try, but our face says a lot of things, and people must know how to read. People can read it, okay? People can read it. Though you try to put on a different face, they realize there's more to this than what I'm hearing. There's something going on here, right? Even sometimes the words that you may choose or whatever, right? People who know you well know that there's a little more here. Something is going on with this person.
Which tells us that in order for a situation like that to be really peeled, I should say, there must be a close connection, Kathy. So therefore, you come and you smile, but anybody that knows you know that your smile just leaves your lips and doesn't reach your eyes. You understand? So not that I'm just putting it all on you, but the reality is when people know us, when they have a close connection with you, they can tell when you are off. And they will bring it to, they will point to you, and then you will be able, you won't have to hide, because you don't have to hide with them. You will be able to bring it all up and get it out in the right context with the right person. Hopefully, that is what happens. Sometimes, unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. So someone may tick you off, because I mean, we are all talking about what we would want to happen, the positives here, but someone may tick you off, and then it may come out in the wrong way. You will communicate really and truly how you're feeling, and therefore it will be all over. And the reality is that whatever you would have said to them was not really meant for them, but they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, oftentimes when students are angry, they're not really angry. They are disappointed with something that happened. But sometimes because of their immaturity, they cannot rightly express how they're feeling. There is an element of maturity that comes with the communication as well. So, and that's what happens with younger persons. You know, they can't express how they feel. They can't communicate, and then it comes out in the wrong way.
And we have another question in the chat, and it says, can our healthy cell be manipulated to be something else or to produce viral behavior? And if so, how does that affect communication between the cells?
So I guess that question is for me. Can a healthy cell be manipulated? Yes. The COVID-19 vaccine is actually designed to manipulate the cell to produce a viral particle, the spike protein, which is found on the outside of the virus particle. And I figured somebody would ask that question. And some of one of the vaccines, for example, the Pfizer Moderna vaccine, which is an mRNA vaccine, is enclosed in this lipid particle, and we would understand now why it's a lipid particle, so it can get into that cell membrane. And it's designed so that it's going to make your cells produce the viral protein, and so present it to the T helper cells and the B cells to produce the antibodies to it. So yes, and viral cells can, and now that it has the viral antigen, which is a spike protein, it can present it on the surface and cause the nearby cells to get activated. So yes, so that can heighten the communication between your body cells and the T helper cells to act on the B cells to produce antibodies. Yeah. So that question, so I hope it's been answered, because I think the perfect example is the mRNA vaccine.
Okay, I have another one, and before that is a comment. It says, the person said they never knew that cells communicate with each other. And they put a question. They said, so when the body comes down with a sickness, does that mean that cells are sending signals, but we are not picking up the signals?
It's possible, or it's possible that their signals may be jammed by the environment, because cells aren't just sitting there. They are actually in a milieu, which we call the extracellular matrix, ECM. So they're actually in this extracellular matrix, and it's the environment in the extracellular matrix that is going to affect how healthy the cells will be and how effective they will be in sending signals to each other. And that's why I said when you come back next week, we will talk about how you can keep that milieu around the cells to a optimum level then, so that your cells can signal properly. So yes, if you get sick, it's that your body condition has affected how the cells are signaling each other. And cells, I mean, they can be very smart. Even bacteria signal each other. And so when a few bacteria enter your cells, sometimes they're not going to make you sick right away. They have to have a quorum, just like how we have a quorum for a board meeting or any other committee. They sense when they have divided enough to have a quorum so they can now attack. So there's a lot of signaling going on. And if the signals are jammed, then we're sick.
I want to thank you, the panelists, for being here with us another Thursday. And I want to thank the attendees for attending. So until next Thursday, 6 p.m., remember to tell a friend. Okay, before we go, I see we have another question. Do we have time, panelists, to answer this one? Okay. Okay. So we go to the.
Yeah, so you want to read it or you want me to just go ahead and read it and answer it?
You can go ahead and read it because it's meant.
So it says AstraZeneca and other, I guess other companies, mRNA, do that manipulation of cells. Is that morally correct to manipulate a healthy cell to produce viral activity? Is there no other way to get the body to produce antibodies? Was something wrong with the old process of putting the, I suppose it's not finished. Well, the old process used to be that you inactivate the virus. You can either kill it by heat or some other means, by ultraviolet light. Kill it, inactivate it, but the viral particle is still able to get into your cells. So we inject it into your cells and we get the cells to go through that process of activating the T cells and the B cells to produce antibodies. The technology has changed and we're now able to command the cell to make the viral particle. And I'm not sure why they chose to go that way if it was easier, because developmental vaccines used to take years. 5 years, 10 years, it used to take a long time. So this seems to be a disease that we can't wait for that long to get a vaccine because so many people are being affected and some people are dying and they're dying miserable deaths. So that technology was already there before COVID came along. And vaccines were being tried out. Attempts were being made to make the vaccines that way. So the technology was there. So it was put to use. And so we can now have the mRNA vaccine, or the way the AstraZeneca has it, where they actually envelope it into another virus and use the DNA of that virus. Complicated story. The morality of it, I cannot speak to. That would be a long theological debate. Maybe we can put that for a topic one afternoon so we can discuss the morality of it and bring in the theologians, and the ethics people to speak to the ethics of manipulating cells. But we've been able to manipulate cells for a long time. We've been growing cells in culture, cancer cells like the cancer cells, the HeLa cells, which came from a cervical cancer of a Black woman. Long ago, an aborted fetus in the 60s, some cell from it could grow, was immortal, found to be immortal. So we've been culturing cells and growing things in those cells. It's part of the technology that we have. So I guess the morality is a debate. And
Dr. Dupree, I just wondering about the choice of words. Manipulate can carry a very negative connotation. It generally does.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we were to use the word prompt the cell to produce.
What was that word, Pastor?
Prompt.
Prompt. Oh, prompt. Okay, that's a positive word.
Produce what's needed to deal with that disease.
Okay.
You may very well get a different perspective, but manipulate has a very pejorative.
It's emotive, it's subjective. I get you, Pastor. I get you. Yeah. prompt or prime the cell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's the work of the cell, actually. That is the work of the cell. But you have a specific disease here that, nothing is known about it, but we have it. And I don't know, maybe if over time, given the cell long enough time, it will produce and to deal with it. I don't know. But
our cells, most of our cells are producing antibodies to deal with COVID, because I don't want to go into the politics of COVID, but most people recover from COVID, and most people are not even symptomatic of COVID. So it seems like we're dealing with it adequately in terms of antibodies. But of course, the people who have underlying problems are dying from COVID. And so we want to save that population as well.
Okay.
We don't just want to save the asymptomatic people and the people who will recover from COVID. We want to save that population, the population of children who might be susceptible, and the elderly, and so on. So we want to help them, because clearly the antibodies are not doing the job because of their underlying disease. They're not producing sufficient antibodies, or they're not producing effective antibodies.
Okay.
Okay. I have another, this is 2 questions, and it says, it is manipulation, isn't it? Our bodies do that automatically, so why manipulate a cell?
Well, for the same reason that we have all of the vaccines that we have, I guess that person feels very strongly about manipulating the cell. But from the time vaccines came about, with whether it was a Black man or it was Edward Jenner, that's basically what we've been doing. We've been priming the body to make antibodies. We've been presenting the virus and saying, here's the virus, and our antigen presenting cells are picking up the virus and presenting them to our T helper cells and to our B cells, and we're making antibodies. Should we leave the entire population to make antibodies to the virus because we don't want to manipulate the cells? Should we do what Boris Johnson said, let everybody get exposed to COVID? Some will die, most will survive, and we will all have antibodies, so then we can go on and move on with our lives. Is it moral to sacrifice a section of the population who do not have the ability to make antibodies like the rest of us? Should we sacrifice them on the altar of non-manipulation? That's all out there to be debated. Maybe we can, that was an anonymous person, right? So maybe they can, I guess, yeah, everybody has the right to, but maybe one day we'll deal with the vaccines. But I guess everybody has heard everything there is to hear about the vaccine, but we can still talk. Yep.
Yes, I agree. I do agree. We have to, those people who, for health reasons, the body's defenses are not up to par. And sometimes it comes with age. As the body declines, the body's defenses, immune system is weakened.
Exactly. It does have a part to play, yes.
What solution can we provide for people whose the whole immunization process has been weakened, which means the virus is going to overtake them? Well,
we can do what some cultures do. In some cultures, so it is said, in the Native American cultures near the North Pole, they put the elderly on a ice floe and they let them float out into the ocean and die there. Do we want to do that with our elderly, or do we want to take care of them as much as possible? And I guess that's where the question will lead us to. Are we going to sacrifice our elderly, and are we going to sacrifice our diabetics? Are we going to say they didn't take care of themselves, so the diabetic, let them die? Are we going to do that? So I'm just arguing from the other side. I am not touting either one product or the other, or tell people what they should do about the vaccine.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. We want to thank you for joining us. For those on Zoom, thank you. For those joining us on YouTube, thank you. And we want to see you again next Thursday at 6 p.m. Remember to tell a friend that Healing Moments is on. So until next time, I will read a quote for you, and it says, "The most important thing in communication is hearing what is not said." So until next Thursday, have a healing moment.
Yes.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care.